Bash. I don't think that's actually possible, but alright. I don't think that's actually possible. But whatever, we'll roll with it.
Thank you, Charles.
That's right. If you ever need a break from Narracott, Charles Morley is in the London Directory. Treat her right, Narracott. As far as I'm concerned, you're a better man in a tight spot than Phil ever was. This little sailor boy isn't going near the sea for a long time to come.
Will you listen to me now?
If you insist.
Hugo and Cyril went down to the beach early that day. By the time I arrived, Cyril was out too far. It was too late to reach him. Hugo claimed he had been distracted helping a passerby with directions. I knew how it would look. I thought I loved him. So I told the coroner's inquest that it was I who had been on the beach. Later, when I was cleared, Hugo was jubilant, yet his feelings for me seemed to have vanished. I realized I had served my purpose. How would it have looked if the boy who stood between him and a fortune died while in his charge? He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. That was the most frightening part. Cyril wanted to swim out to the rocks. All Hugo did was let him.
Mr. Owen invited the wrong guest. It should have been Hugo out there.
No. I should have told the police the truth in the first place. I will now. I have no more right to subvert justice than Mr. Owen. Where is your brother?
Plymouth, turning himself in. Thanks to your and Morley's statements, he's sure to be exonerated.
And us?
Are you still confused?
No. I'm certain now. What about you?
Well, there's another ending to that 10 little sailor boys rhyme. One little sailor boy left all alone. He got married, and then there were none.
But surely then there were two. You could count back up, although that'd be a bit weird.
Silence, please. I have prepared a special reward for you. The original ending to our little story is somewhat different than the one you have just experienced.
It is.
If you can complete a final puzzle, childishly simple really, you will be able to learn the original solution to "And Then There Were None," as Dame Agatha Christie first wrote it. Interested? Then your first step is to make your way to the dining room for a final treat.
Okay, let's give this a go. I know what it is. I've already kind of hinted at it. Well, said bits of it. But let's have a look.
The last little sailor boy.
Okay. What do I do with it?
Silence, please.
Oh, yeah.
I have prepared a special reward for
Oh,
you.
it's the same thing again.
The original ending to our little story is somewhat different than the one you have just experienced. If you can complete a final puzzle, childishly simple really, you will be able to learn the original solution to "And Then There Were None," as Dame Agatha Christie first wrote it. Interested? Then your first step is to make your way to the dining room for a final treat.
Well, let's see if this is a.
I'm afraid it's stuck that way.
Not if we smash it.
Those don't work together. Nothing else to see about that.
Oh, I was wondering if it broke and you got something out of it. Or maybe we interacted with that and it told us. But so, I want to try and see if we can solve this. I know what it. Just because it's a puzzle, I know what the solution is. So it's not. I know there wasn't an issue there. Okay. So.
That isn't the best place for me to go at the moment.
Oh, okay. So it's just stopping me from going certain places.
At the moment, I think I'm needed elsewhere.
Okay, so he's basically making me go certain directions. So only certain places. Okay, that's fine. The screening room, maybe? Because maybe we're going to see an alternative cutscene. That was foolish.
I can't see anything of interest.
No.
It's locked fast.
Oh, does he live there? Does he go there? Hello again. So yes, okay. So I won't explain. I was going to explain over the credits what the original story was, but if we're going to see it,
The film
let's see
has
it.
been spooled.
From my earliest youth, I realized that my nature was a mass of contradictions. I have an incurably romantic imagination, and it was for this reason that I adopted a rather childish and unreliable approach, writing my confession, enclosing it in a bottle, and casting it into the waves. There is 100 to 1 chance that this confession may be found, and then a hitherto unsolved murder mystery will be explained. Another trait born of my contradictory nature is my sadistic delight in causing death. From an early age, I knew very strongly the lust to kill. And yet, I was also indoctrinated with a strong sense of justice. I have always felt that the innocent should be spared and the guilty punished. With this mental makeup, it was inevitable that I would adopt the law as my profession. After ascending to the bench, I found that most of my baser desires were quenched in a legal and just way. And yet of late, I have felt a nagging urge, one that will not free me from its insistent grip. That is the urge to commit a murder myself. I fancied myself an artist in crime, and my imagination waxed secretly to this colossal force. However, I was restrained by my innate sense of justice. The innocent must not suffer. And then, quite suddenly, the solution came to me. I would punish those that the law could not touch. In my years on the bench, there were many cases that frustrated my will, cases wherein I knew the accused to be guilty, and yet the evidence was such that he could never be convicted. Cases of deliberate murder that were quite untouchable within the confines of the law. So I determined to commit not just one murder, but murder on a grand scale. A childish rhyme of my infancy came back to me, the rhyme of the 10 little sailor boys. Something about it fascinated me, the inexorable diminishment, the sense of inevitability. And so I began, secretly, to collect victims. I will not go into detail about how this was accomplished. Suffice to say, I was convinced of the guilt of every one of my victims, and I knew enough about them via my connections to be able to lure each one to Shipwreck Island with an appropriate bait. And now to the mechanics of the actual crime. In what I took as a sign, none of my plans misfired, and all of my guests arrived at Shipwreck Island on the 8th of August. The party included myself. The order of the deaths were dictated by what I viewed as my victims' varying degrees of guilt. Those whose guilt was lightest should go first, and not suffer the increasing mental strain and fear reserved for the more cold-blooded offenders. The first death had already occurred. Archibald Morris, a shady little dope peddler, had set up the details for me, renting the island, sending the letters, and recording the gramophone record before I ended his life with a dose of potassium cyanide. Anthony Marsden and Mrs. Rogers died next, one instantaneously, the other in a peaceful sleep. Marsden's crime was one of circumstance and his amoral nature. Mrs. Rogers, I had no doubt, acted largely under the influence of her husband. Their murders were the easiest. Poison, easily slipped into a glass for each of them, as at this point, no one had any reason to be suspicious. General Mackenzie met his death quite painlessly. and never heard me approach. I am convinced that he was dead long before he ever came to Shipwreck Island. At this point, I found it necessary to recruit an ally. Dr. Armstrong seemed the most suited to this task, as it was inconceivable to him that a man of my standing could be a murderer. He was taken in with no resistance. I killed Rogers on the morning of the 10th. He too did not hear me approach. During the chaos arising from finding his body, I slipped into Lombard's room and abstracted his revolver. At breakfast, I slipped my last dose of poison into Miss Brent's coffee. It was enough to render her unconscious, and I returned a short time later to inject a strong dose of cyanide into her. It was just after this that I intimated to Armstrong that we must carry our plan into effect, that I must appear to be the next victim. This would, perhaps, rattle the murderer, and at any rate, would allow me to move about the house and spy on whom I wished. A gunshot and some red mud on the forehead was all it took. After all, it was only Armstrong who examined me closely. After returning the revolver to Lombard's room, I had a rendezvous set up with Armstrong on the edge of a cliff. He was still quite unsuspicious, although he ought to have been warned by the nursery rhyme, "A red herring swallowed one." Once at the cliff, I uttered an exclamation. Leaned over the cliff. Wasn't that the mouth of a cave? He leaned right over. A swift push sent him quickly into the heaving sea below. He took the red herring all right. And now came the moment I had anticipated. 3 people who were so frightened of each other that anything might happen. And one of them had a revolver. I watched them from the windows of the house. When Blore came up alone, I had the big marble clock poised ready. Exit Blore. From my window, I saw Vera shoot Lombard. I always thought she was a match for him and more. I then immediately set the stage in her bedroom. It was an interesting experiment. Would the knowledge of her own guilt, the hypnotic suggestion of her surroundings, and the nervous tension of having just shot a man be enough to coerce her into taking her own life? It was. Vera Claythorne hanged herself before my very eyes as I stood in the shadow of the wardrobe. And now I shall finish writing this. I shall enclose it and seal it in a bottle and throw the bottle into the sea. Why? Yes. Why? I suppose I have a pitiful human wish that someone should know just how clever I have been. I must go now and finish this. It is essential that my body be found in accordance with the record kept by my fellow victims. My own life is of no consequence. My doctors tell me I have a month to live at most. I do not wish to die the death of the invalid patient, steeped to the gills in drugs, culminating in a complete loss of human dignity. I will instead be found laid neatly in my bed, shot through the forehead. When the sea goes down, there will come from the mainland boats and men, and they will find 10 dead bodies and an unsolved problem on Shipwreck Island. Signed, Lawrence Wargrave.
Oh, there we go. So now we're on to the credits. So yes, in the original, it's Judge Wargrave, which kind of explains why he's more of a central... He's the focus character, one of the focus character, really kind of the focus character, because he's going to be around for a while, but also to kind of point that, you know, maybe to kind of distract a little bit with the whole, is he, because he's really pushing to try and solve and work it out. So in the end, with Vera Claythorne, I think there's loads of seaweed. He lays loads of seaweed around in her room. So she goes up to her room, she smells the sea, and that brings everything back. And that's the hypnotic suggestion. And that's kind of where it kind of ends. And then someone finds the letter, and this is what's said. So it's quite interesting. The opening is very similar. It's only really. No, I think Miss Brent, they changed what happened to Miss Brent, because obviously she can't be injected with cyanide, because that wouldn't work with... That wouldn't line up with how it works in this, that she's the killer. So they did have to play with it a little bit, but I think that's the only major change, is swapping who did it, which is really good. I enjoyed it. There were a few bits where it wasn't quite clear what I was meant to be doing. Which is... I don't know if that's a standard thing with point-and-click adventure games or a standard thing with me. Sometimes I think a few of the puzzles would have been easier if they could have highlighted some of the things you could interact with. A bit more. Like, I moused over things and they didn't pop up. So, like, for example, the trough and the water pump, I think it would have been helpful to have had those, because then it would have been more obvious that they were things you could interact with. Yeah, so that's the only real downside. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed the story, but I really enjoy... And then there went on, and I like mystery games and mystery books. So this was one that was really good, and I really enjoyed playing it. So, yes. There we go. Not sure what's coming next. That will be up to the people on Patreon, if I've got any patrons of the appropriate level. Otherwise, I'm picking it, so we'll see what happens. But yes, I really enjoyed it. They added Patrick Narracott. That's a major difference. But I think it's because either then you've got to play with it a bit more. Either you die, you're the murderer, or you change the ending where you have people survive, which is what happens in this, and I think some of the films. But yeah, so it was a way to twist it. I'm not entirely sure what value it added over playing other characters and having them survive. Other than you then don't have one of the other characters save your guy. Yeah, so I can kind of see that. But yes. There we go. So what will happen next time? Who knows? Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for watching.